It began with barking, frantic, sharp, echoing across the forest like gunshots at dawn. Somewhere in the dense, rain-drenched wilderness of Shenandoah National Park, two German shepherds stood rigid on a narrow ridge, their bodies trembling, not with fear, but with certainty. Ears up, tails frozen, noses locked on something no human eye could see. Then, as if pulled by an invisible string, they bolted down the slope, straight into a wall of thorns and shadow. Their handler, Sarah Collins, scrambled after them, slipping, on moss-slick rocks, heart pounding. She had no clue what they'd just found, only that they were sure. And time was running out. People think rescue dogs follow footprints, Sarah would later say. But that morning, there weren't any. Just air, mud, and something science can't fully explain. This story isn't about a lucky break or a miracle. It's about instinct, biology, training, and two dogs who did what no drone, helicopter, or GPS system could. This isn't just another animal hero story. This is the moment the dogs outran the storm, the clock, and even death itself, and it started 12 hours earlier with silence. Park Ranger James Wilson wasn't late often. A 12-year veteran of Shenandoah National Park, he was methodical to a fault. Every morning at 6:30 sharp, he checked in by radio from wherever he was patrolling. Mountaintop, waterfall trail, fire lookout, didn't matter. Except this morning, there was nothing. Just dead air. Dispatch called back twice. Still nothing. At 6:42 a.m., a Level 3 search protocol was initiated. The last GPS ping from his patrol truck had registered near Deep Pine Ridge, a remote, rugged section of forest with no cell coverage and terrain so steep it made search teams groan. Temperatures were falling fast, rain had pounded the area overnight, and every minute that passed made survival less likely. By noon, 2 thermal drones had come up empty. The signal from Wilson's radio hadn't moved. It was either off or broken. They didn't know if he was injured, unconscious, or already gone. Enter Sarah Collins. Sarah wasn't a park ranger. She was part of an elite K-9 search and rescue team based out of Charlottesville, and she'd been working with her dogs, Maverick and Luna, since they were pups. Maverick was the powerhouse, fast, driven, the kind of dog who would charge through fire if you told him someone needed help on. The other side, Luna was quieter, more methodical but no less intense. Together they made a team that had recovered 7 lost hikers, 4 missing children, and, once, a man with dementia who had wandered 11 miles off trail. Still, even Sarah had doubts about this case. The rain ruined the scent trail, she told the incident commander. If he's injured and can't move, we're basically searching for a ghost. But ghosts, it turns out, leave clues, just not the kind you can see. That afternoon, while the drone team combed one quadrant of forest, Sarah stood on a ridge 2 miles from where Wilson had last been seen. It didn't make logical sense to start there, but instinct told her the scent would drift that way. She'd studied something called scent coning, a rare wind scent dispersion pattern that sometimes pulled human odor far from the source. And she trusted her dogs more than any thermal camera, so she gave them the signal. Search. And they... Now, if you're just joining us and these kinds of true animal hero stories move you, take a second to subscribe to Heroes for Animals. We bring you real life-saving moments like this every week, stories where 4 paws and a beating heart change everything. Back in the forest, Maverick and Luna were locked in. They moved like dancers, fast but precise, leaping over logs, weaving between roots, scaling rocks with zero hesitation. Sarah followed, barely able to keep up, relying on their movements more than her map. For 20 minutes, they cut through underbrush. Then 30. At one point, they paused. Both dogs sniffed the air, tails flicking. Sarah froze. This was what she trained for, the moment when everything went quiet, when instinct overrode logic. Maverick took off first, veering hard left. Luna followed, and that's when they started barking. It wasn't random. Trained canines have a very specific bark when they've located something, or someone. It's sharp, persistent, directional, and it doesn't stop. Sarah knew before she saw anything they'd found him. She crashed through the final layer of brush and saw Maverick standing at the edge of a steep ravine, barking so hard his front paws left the ground. Luna was down on her belly, peering into the shadows below. Sarah dropped to her knees and looked over the edge. What she saw made her blood run cold. 30 feet down, partially hidden beneath twisted branches and soaked leaves, was the motionless body of a man. His uniform was torn, his leg looked wrong, and his radio lay shattered beside him. It was James Wilson, alive or dead. Sarah couldn't tell. She radioed for help, relaying GPS coordinates and requesting vertical extraction support. While the climbing team geared up, Sarah scrambled around, the ravine carving a path down toward him. Luna followed carefully. When they reached the ranger, he was still breathing, barely. His skin was pale, his lips blue. His leg was broken and he was hypothermic to the point of slipping into shock, but he was alive. Luna lay beside him, not moving, not barking, just watching him, as if willing him to hold on. That image of a dog curled around a man she'd never met, keeping him warm with her body, was caught on the GoPro mounted to Maverick's harness. The footage would later go viral, but at that moment Sarah didn't care about cameras. She cared about minutes. Because James Wilson didn't have many left. The rescue took another 90 minutes. Technical ropes, medical triage. At one point, Ranger Wilson opened his eyes. They weren't focused, but they moved toward Luna. His lips moved too. He didn't say help. He didn't say, "Where am I?" He said, "You found me." And she had. Not just found him, but kept him alive, long enough to be rescued. Not because she knew him, not because she was promised a reward. Just because that's what she was trained to do, because that's who she was. James Wilson had every reason to die in that ravine. He'd hit his head during the fall. Hard enough to crack the bone behind his left ear. His femur was broken in 2 places. His radio was destroyed on impact, leaving him completely cut off from the outside world. Worse, he'd landed in a low, shadowed gully where cold air sank and stayed. With temperatures dropping fast, he had no shelter, no movement, and no way to signal for help. Most people in that situation don't last 12 hours, but somehow, he did. And not just because he was lucky, because 2 German shepherds named Maverick and Luna tracked him through conditions that by all expert accounts should have been untrackable. What happened next wasn't just a rescue. It sparked a scientific investigation. After the extraction team lifted Wilson to safety and medics stabilized him, the focus shifted to the dogs. Sarah Collins, exhausted and soaked, sat in the back of a pickup truck beside her K9 partners as rain pelted the roof. She cradled a bottle of water in her hands, still too wired to drink it. A park ranger from another unit sat across from her. He'd seen plenty of rescues before, but this one had him rattled. "How the hell did they find him?" he asked, more to himself than to her. Sarah just looked at her dogs, then at the forest. "I think we're only starting to understand that." In the weeks that followed, researchers from Cornell University's K9 olfaction lab reached out to Sarah. Dr. Nathan Lewis, one of the leading scientists in canine scent detection, had seen the GoPro footage and wanted access to the full data. Weather, conditions, terrain maps, the dog's GPS paths, everything. Why? Because what Maverick and Luna had done didn't just bend the rules of tracking, it broke them. Here's what we know. The average search and rescue dog works by picking up ground scent, molecules that fall off the human body, stick to grass, bark, and dirt. But rain washes these particles away. Heat disperses them, time degrades them. After 12 hours in heavy rain and dense forest, those ground scents should have been gone. But Maverick and Luna hadn't followed ground scent. They'd tracked what's called air scent, microscopic particles still suspended in the air, carried by wind currents. These molecules can linger in unpredictable ways depending on terrain, humidity, and temperature. They rise and sink, drift left, stall, then spin back like invisible whirlpools. It's a chaotic system no human can see or fully model, and yet the dogs had read it like a map. Dr. Lewis was stunned. They weren't just following a trail, he said. They were predicting it, anticipating where the scent would go next. That's not just training. That's something deeper. Scientists already knew dogs had about 225 million olfactory receptors, compared to a human's 5 million. But what Maverick and Luna did suggested more than just raw power. It suggested computation, decision-making, intuition. Think about trying to find a single second on a stopwatch running for 32,000 years, Lewis explained. That's the kind of detection threshold we're talking about. And somehow these dogs processed that in real time. And it wasn't a fluke. 6 months earlier, Maverick had tracked a lost boy through a carnival ground filled with hundreds of overlapping scents: cotton candy, engine oil, popcorn, people, and still found the child hiding beneath a vendor's trailer. Luna once located an elderly woman with Alzheimer's who had wandered off into a cornfield, using scent molecules drifting over 400 yards in open wind. But this case was different. Longer, wetter, colder, and far more dangerous. Back in Shenandoah, Sarah had begun receiving letters. Not emails, handwritten letters. From strangers, retired canine handlers, hikers, veterans. People who had followed the story online or watched the raw GoPro footage on news segments and couldn't believe what they'd seen. One letter came from a woman in Texas who'd lost her father in a remote hiking accident the year before. He hadn't been found for 9 days. If someone had dogs like yours, she wrote, maybe he'd still be here. Sarah kept every letter in a weatherproof box beside her training shed, not as trophies, but as reminders. Meanwhile, James Wilson recovered slowly. At the University of Virginia Medical Center, surgeons repaired the fracture in his leg and monitored his head injury. He didn't remember the fall. What he did remember was the cold, the loneliness, and the moment it ended. Woke up and something was breathing next to me, he recalled in an interview. I thought maybe it was a bear at first, but then I saw eyes, gentle eyes, and I knew I was okay. He was talking about Luna. She didn't bark. She didn't move. Just laid there beside me like it was her job to keep me alive. And in a way it was. When Wilson was discharged weeks later, he asked to visit the dogs. Sarah met him at the canine training facility just outside Charlottesville. He wore a soft cast on one leg and moved slowly using a cane. Maverick spotted him first and broke into a gallop. Luna trotted behind, reserved, but alert. They both stopped a foot in front of Wilson, looked up, and wagged their tails. No barking. No jumping. Just recognition. He sank to his knees and started crying. They found me, he whispered. They really found me. Sarah stood nearby, her hands in her jacket pockets. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Some moments don't need commentary, just silence. Today, Ranger Wilson volunteers with the K9 unit on weekends, helping train new handlers. He reads weather data, sets up scent trails, and talks with new recruits about what it's like to be the one who needs saving. I used to think of these dogs as assets, he says now. But they're more than that. There's something we don't have a word for. Guardians, maybe. Or guides. Or just something better than us. Maverick and Luna have since worked 12 more cases. They've found 9 more people. Lost hikers, injured campers, a missing child who fell into a gully. Behind a campground, each time they showed the same urgency, the same quiet focus, the same refusal to quit, but they're aging. German shepherds in the field typically work 7 to 9 years before retiring. The pace is brutal. The terrain wears down their joints, their eyes dim, their muscles stiffen. Sarah watches them closely, now every day, for signs of fatigue. She knows the time is coming. When it does, Maverick and Luna won't be rehomed or forgotten. They'll stay with her. They'll live out their years as beloved family members, sleeping by the fire, chasing tennis balls instead of helicopters, and their legacy will live on, not just in training manuals or lab reports, but in lives. In Ranger Wilson. In the boy found beneath a trailer. In the letters from strangers who now believe a little more in the bond between human and dog. There's one final scene from that ravine that never made the news reports. After the rescue crew, lifted Wilson out and Sarah was left alone to hike back to the staging area. She paused at the edge of the forest. Maverick trotted beside her, but Luna stayed behind, standing over the spot where Wilson had lain. She looked at Sarah, then looked down, then back at Sarah. Just once. Then she turned and followed. What was she thinking? We'll never know. But if you've ever loved a dog, you already understand. When Sarah Collins looks at Maverick and Luna, she doesn't see pets. She sees partners. She sees the miles they've run, the storms they've worked through, the lives they've pulled back from, the edge of death. She sees the weight they carry silently without complaint. And she sees the clock ticking, because every working dog has a countdown built into their bones. And these two, they're more than halfway through it. I try not to think about it, she says, running her hand along Maverick's flank. But I feel it every time they slow down just a little. Maverick is 8 now. Luna's turning 9. In human years, they're middle-aged, still strong, still sharp. But Sarah knows the signs. The recovery time after each mission takes longer. Luna's joints stiffen on cold mornings. Maverick doesn't leap into the back of the truck anymore. He waits for Sarah to lower the ramp. They still train daily, still pass every scent test, every simulation. But Sarah's preparing them quietly for what comes next. Retirement. That word sounds strange in her mouth, because for these dogs, work isn't just a job. It's identity, purpose, calling. They don't live for praise or treats, she says. They live to find, that's what lights them up. Sarah first met Maverick and Luna when they were 12 weeks old. Back then, they were all floppy paws, big ears, and clumsy bursts of energy. But even at that age, they showed promise. Trainers look for certain traits: focus, drive, environmental boldness. Some dogs shy away from loud noises, slick surfaces, or tight spaces. Those don't make it. Maverick never hesitated. Luna, while more cautious, showed remarkable problem-solving ability. She'd study a challenge for 10 seconds, then solve it with precision. Where Maverick charged ahead, Luna calculated, they were opposites, and they were perfect. Training began with simple games: find the treat, locate the toy, chase the scent cone. Everything was play, but strategic. The dogs weren't just being taught commands. They were being hardwired to think like hunters, to associate success with scent, to build mental maps of invisible trails. By 6 months, they could locate a hidden object across a football field. By 1 year, they could identify Sarah's personal scent out of a lineup of 6 handlers. By age 2, they were certified for live search work, and they've been saving lives ever since. There's something special about the bond between handler and canine. It's not like the bond with a house dog. It's more intense, more mutual. Handlers learn to read ear twitches, tail flicks, paw hesitations, signals most people would never notice. Dogs learn to read posture, tone, even breathing patterns. Over time, they develop what animal behaviorists call cross-species communication, a near telepathic connection where intent flows without words. I don't have to tell them where to go, Sarah says. Sometimes I just feel it, and they do too. That connection isn't magic. It's thousands of hours side by side, training in rain, snow, desert heat, riding helicopters, sleeping in cabins, waiting in silence on dark trails. Trust forged in hardship. But it takes a toll. Search and rescue dogs work harder than most humans ever will. Their noses process billions of particles per second. Their brains stay locked into a scent puzzle for hours. Their bodies push through thorns, mud, ice, cliffs, all for the chance to find someone who's lost, scared, or dying. And they rarely stop, even when they should. They'll work past the point of injury, Sarah explains. It's our job to know when to call it. She's had close calls. Maverick once tore a ligament jumping a ravine. Luna sliced her paw on broken shale and didn't limp until the mission was done. They don't quit, because to them, quitting means failing their person. That loyalty isn't something you can teach. It's bred, selected, passed down through generations of working dogs, going back over a century to the breed's origin. German. Shepherds were developed in the late 1800s by a German cavalry officer named Max von Stephanitz. He wanted a dog that was strong, smart, obedient, and above all, useful. What he created became the blueprint for police dogs, military dogs, guide dogs, and eventually, search and rescue dogs. Maverick and Luna carry that legacy in their blood. But what makes them exceptional isn't just genetics, it's heart. Their most recent mission proved that again. A 10-year-old boy wandered off during a family camping trip. Autistic, nonverbal, afraid of loud sounds. When the family realized he was missing, it was already dusk. Panic set in. Rangers were called. Search began, but the forest was dense. The boy wasn't responding to name calls. And temperatures were dropping. Sarah and her team were deployed at 10:17 p.m. By 11:03, Luna had locked on scent. She veered off trail, bushwhacking through briars. Maverick followed. They led Sarah nearly half a mile east, away from the main search zone, into a thick stand of pines. And there, tucked inside the hollow of a fallen tree, was the boy, barefoot, shivering, eyes wide. Luna didn't bark. She crawled in beside him and lay down. The boy reached out and touched her collar. He smiled. These moments don't always make the news. But for the families, they're everything. That boy's mother still sends updates, photos of him holding a stuffed German shepherd, birthday cards from Luna, emails full of gratitude. Sarah prints them all, adds them to the box. But the stories aren't always joyful. There are missions where they arrive too late, where the dogs find someone the way no one wants them to, where the body is cold and the grief is fresh, and all Sarah can do is sit in the dirt with her dogs and breathe through the weight of it. And even then, she says, the dogs don't flinch, they stay, they always stay. Like they understand that just being there helps. Sarah often wonders how much they know. Do they sense sorrow? Do they carry it? She's read the studies about dogs processing human emotion in the same brain regions they process their own, about how canines can detect stress hormones, read facial expressions, even adjust their behavior to comfort someone crying. But she doesn't need a study. She has Maverick, who sits a little closer when she's hurting, and Luna, who once stood guard at the hospital room door while Sarah sat with her dying father, refusing to move until he passed. The end will come, eventually. One day, Maverick won't respond to the search command with that joyful lunge. One day, Luna will lift her head from the porch and decide to stay in the sun instead of following the truck. Sarah dreads that day. Not because she fears life without them. She knows they'll always be part of her. But because she fears the silence. The absence of that energy. The feeling of standing at a trailhead without them. People think the hard part is losing them, she says. But the hard part is knowing how much they gave, and knowing I can never fully repay it. When that day comes, she plans to retire their vests, mount them in shadow boxes, and hang them in the K9 trailer. Future dogs will train under their legacy. New handlers will ask about their stories, and Sarah will tell them, not to impress, but to inspire, to show what's possible. Because Maverick and Luna didn't just find people. They found something in all of us. Something quiet, primal, hopeful. A reminder that in the darkest places, someone is still searching. Long after the sirens fade, after the news vans pack up and the forest goes quiet again, what remains? For most search and rescue missions, the answer is simple. A file closed, a name checked off, and a thank you card mailed. But when the story involves Maverick and Luna, the impact doesn't stop at rescue. It ripples. It teaches. It transforms. 3. Weeks after the Deep Pine Ridge mission, the one that brought James Wilson back from the edge, a message arrived at the Shenandoah K9 Command Center. It wasn't a formal letter or an award from the Park Service. It was an email from a teacher in Arizona who'd seen the video of Maverick and Luna's rescue. She'd shown it to her 6th grade class during a lesson on working animals. What happened next surprised even her. The kids didn't just ask about dogs, she wrote. They asked about scent trails, air currents, teamwork, empathy. They wanted to know how Luna knew to stay beside the man. One boy said, she knew he was sad, even if he couldn't talk. That comment stuck with Sarah. Because it was true. Luna had understood something no camera or algorithm could have picked up. And that instinct, unmeasurable, unteachable, was part of what made her extraordinary. It wasn't just training, it was heart. Stories like that began to appear more frequently. A search and rescue unit in Montana adopted Sarah's scent coning strategy after studying her team's movement logs. A paramedic school in Chicago added canine rescue cases to their trauma response curriculum. A national outdoor supply chain ran a campaign donating booties and harnesses to volunteer canine teams in high-risk parks, and the Park Service. They took notice too. 6 months after the rescue, the National Park Service launched a funding initiative to expand canine units in under-resourced parks across the U.S. The pilot program, originally set for 3 dogs, was expanded to 12. Sarah was asked to help design the training framework. She hesitated at first. She didn't see herself as a teacher. She was a field person, boots in the mud, compass in hand. But when they asked her to speak at a conference in Colorado Springs, she said yes and brought Luna with her. I didn't know how to talk to a room full of officials and scientists, Sarah admitted later. So I let Luna do the talking. Halfway through the presentation, Sarah gave a live demonstration of scent identification using clothing samples and terrain cues. Luna located a hidden glove in under 3 minutes, moving calmly and confidently through the crowd. The room stood up and applauded. Afterward, one of the organizers approached her with tears in her eyes. My brother went missing in Utah. 10 years ago, she said. No dogs were sent out. It was too remote. If someone had sent a dog like her, maybe we wouldn't have had to wait 8 years to find him. Sarah didn't know what to say. So she let Luna sit beside the woman, nose against her hand, eyes calm. That's the thing about these dogs. They don't just search. They listen. They understand grief in a way most people can't. In the months that followed, Maverick and Luna became unofficial ambassadors for working dogs nationwide. Their footage was used in training modules. Their scent cone mission was featured in a university's AI modeling study comparing canine efficiency to drone technology. Spoiler, the dogs still won. And a small nonprofit named Scent of Hope was founded in their honor, dedicated to providing scent-trained canines to communities in need. Sarah had no part in creating it. She just got a call one morning. Hey, we named it after your story. She smiled. I guess that story isn't mine anymore, she said. It's everyone's now. But for all the public attention, Sarah's favorite moments are still the quiet ones, like sunrise hikes with the dogs when no one's around, like watching Luna roll on her back in a dewy meadow, or hearing Maverick's low, sleepy sighs as he curls up after a long day. They're just dogs after all, but also not just dogs. When local kids visit the training center, Sarah always starts with the same line. You probably think rescue dogs are superheroes. They nod, wide-eyed. But you know what they really are? Silence. They're just dogs who never gave up, and whose humans never stopped listening. She teaches them how to read the wind, how to check the terrain, how scent moves like water, pooling and flowing in ways you can't always predict. And then she lets the kids pet Luna, which, of course, they all line up for. Back at home, the wall of fines grows longer. It's not flashy, just a corkboard in Sarah's hallway where she pins a photo or a map or a note from every successful mission. One card reads, "To the dogs who found me when I couldn't find myself." That one came from a teenage girl who ran away after a fight, at home, and spent 2 nights in the woods. She wouldn't talk to anyone except Luna. Sarah knows there will come a day when Maverick can't track anymore, when Luna can't leap logs or climb hills. Their joints will stiffen. Their hearts, those engines of devotion, will slow, but their impact, that doesn't retire, it echoes, in every student who learns about scent science, in every rookie handler who trains harder because they watch that body cam footage, in every hiker who straps on a beacon or tells someone their route, just in case, because they know someone might come looking. James Wilson knows that better than anyone. He still visits once a month, brings treats, checks in, sometimes just sits with Luna on the porch and watches the sky. They didn't just find me, he says. They changed how I think about life, about loyalty, about paying attention to the quiet things. He's working on a memoir now, not about his job or even his rescue. It's about what he calls the pause, the moment between being found and being saved. The moment when you're still broken, he explains, but someone's already beside you. He dedicates the book to Luna. Not long ago, Sarah received an email from a handler in Oregon. His dog had recently passed away after 7 years of search work. He'd watched every video of Maverick and Luna he could find. He asked one question: how? Do you know when to let go? Sarah didn't answer right away. She thought about the missions, the pain, the miracles. Then she wrote, "You don't let go. You let them live on. Every time you train, every time you search, every time you believe in what they taught you. The world is full of darkness, storms, accidents, fear, loss. But sometimes in that darkness 2 shapes move through the trees, one black and tan, eyes forward, one sable, nose down, tail still. And somewhere up ahead, someone is waiting to be found." It came quietly, like most endings do. No dramatic collapse, no single moment when the leash was hung up for good. Just a slow, almost invisible shift in rhythm. Maverick began sleeping longer after missions. Luna hesitated before jumping into the truck. Sarah started watching them more closely during training sessions, taking mental notes she didn't want to write down. At first, she told herself it was just the weather. A little stiffness from a cold front, a sore paw from a rough trail. But the truth was harder. The dogs were aging out of their calling, and Sarah had to face it. "People think the hardest part is the last rescue," she says. "But really it's the weeks before, when you know the end's coming but no one says it out loud." Maverick was 9, Luna, almost 10. Most working German shepherds retire between 8 and 10 years old, depending on their health. Some go longer, but only with strict limits and reduced workloads. Sarah couldn't risk it, not with the terrain they covered, not with what she owed them. She scheduled their final active mission on a cool April morning. It wasn't dramatic. A training. Assist with new recruits in Rockingham County. No missing persons, no helicopters. Just a mock search scenario in a wooded preserve, with planted scents and hidden volunteers. Maverick moved with his usual enthusiasm, tail high, nose sharp. Luna was methodical, as always, quiet and intense. They completed the course in under 30 minutes, even beating one of the younger K9 pairs. But when it was over, Sarah didn't call for a second round. She crouched beside them, hands in their fur, and whispered, "That's it. You did it. You're done." She tried to keep her voice steady. She almost did. Back at the trailer, she opened a small wooden box she'd been saving for the occasion. Inside were 2 custom leather collars, one embossed with Maverick 2015-2024, and the other, Luna, 2015-2024. On each one was a brass tag shaped like a mountain ridge. On the back, a single word, "Found." She placed them around their necks, and for the first time in years, she wept. Retirement looks different for working dogs. They don't clock out and reminisce over drinks. They don't give farewell speeches or cash out pensions. They just stop and wait to understand what that means. For Maverick, the transition was easy. He became a porch sleeper, a bone collector, a squirrel watcher. He gained 5 pounds and discovered the luxury of sleeping in on rainy mornings. Luna struggled. She paced during training hours, whined when Sarah left with the younger dogs, brought her leash to the door every day at 6 a.m. The hardest part of retiring a dog like Luna isn't physical, it's emotional. She doesn't know what rest is, Sarah said. Her joy is in the job. And suddenly the job's gone. So Sarah gave her a new one. She started taking Luna to the local VA center every Friday. At first, it was just a visit, a way to offer comfort to veterans dealing with PTSD or physical rehabilitation. But Luna quickly became something more. She learned to sit beside wheelchairs without being prompted. She nudged knees during tough therapy sessions. And one morning, when a Navy vet broke down in tears mid-sentence, Luna climbed gently onto the bed beside him and stayed. She's never been trained as a therapy dog, Sarah told the staff. They just smiled. She doesn't need the title. Meanwhile, Maverick found his new purpose on the home front. He became a mentor to a younger German Shepherd pup named Scout, whom Sarah had recently begun training. Maverick didn't teach with barks or growls. He taught by doing. Scout watched him constantly, how he responded to commands, how he waited for signals, how he moved in silence through the woods. Sarah noticed. So did the rest of the team. It's like he's passing the torch, one of the handlers said. And in a way, he was. But retirement didn't erase the legacy of their work. Their story continued to ripple through the search and rescue community. Departments in 6 other states had adopted scent coning as part of their K9 protocol. Luna's behavior during the Wilson rescue, her decision to lay beside the injured man, was cited in new emotional response training for SAR dogs. And Sarah, she was invited to co-author a chapter in a national K9 search and rescue training manual. It wasn't her comfort zone, but she said yes. One section of the manual is titled, "When They Know Before You Do." It describes moments when dogs make decisions without cues, moments based on trust, not commands. The example? Luna, breaking protocol to follow a scent trail that no drone could see. Sarah also began visiting schools more frequently. She spoke about responsibility, about commitment, about how love looks like 3 a.m. drills, paw salve after rough terrain, and trusting each other in silence. She always ended with the same message. They don't do this for glory. They do it for you. And that always landed, because every kid in the room had wanted to be found at some point, even if they'd never been lost. There's a photo Sarah keeps on her fridge. It's not from a rescue. It's a candid, taken one. Summer evening by a neighbor. In it, Sarah sits on the back porch barefoot, holding a beer. Luna's head rests on her lap. Maverick lies nearby, tongue out, watching fireflies. The caption is scribbled on the back in Sharpie. After everything, still home. James Wilson came by the house last fall. He brought a book, the finished manuscript of his memoir, The Pause. He dedicated it to the dog who didn't leave and the woman who followed. Sarah read it in 2 sittings, cried in both. At the end of the book, Wilson had written something that stayed with her. You never forget the sound of being found. It's been almost a year now since Maverick and Luna's last official mission. They still wake early, still run the fence, line like they're checking perimeters, still look up when Sarah grabs her boots, but they don't bolt toward the truck. Not anymore. They wait, until she says the words they know now. Not today, kids. You've done enough. And they have. They've done more than enough. They've searched when others gave up. They've found when no one else could. They've stayed when staying mattered most. And in doing so, they've written a legacy in mud tracks, forest trails, and the quiet moments between life and death. What remains when the work stops? Love, memory, the shape of something bigger than mission reports or medals, the echo of a bark in the dark woods, the knowledge that somewhere, out there, someone was brought home because 2 dogs refused to quit. And that echo, it never really fades. It just leads the way for the next ones. Spring came late to the Blue Ridge that year. The frost lingered longer than usual. The dogwood trees hesitated to bloom, and for Sarah Collins, every sunrise carried the quiet realization that her house was still. Not empty. Maverick still snored like a freight train by the fireplace, and Luna, ever alert, still followed her from room to room. But the rhythm of life had shifted. The call-outs were fewer. The rush to gear up had slowed. The barking that once meant we're on a mission now simply meant someone's at the door. The season of rescue had passed, but a new one was just beginning. Scout was 10 months old now, lean, fast, eager. The young German Shepherd Sarah had taken on as a trainee was beginning to come into his own. He hadn't seen a real rescue yet, but his instincts were undeniable. He moved like Maverick. He waited like Luna. He had the drive, the focus, the quiet confidence that comes not just from genetics, but from being raised in the shadow of greatness. And that shadow was growing long. One afternoon, Sarah brought Scout to the training field behind the old ranger cabin where Maverick and Luna had first learned to track. It was early April. A light breeze carried the scent of damp leaves and wild onions. Maverick watched from the porch, head resting on his paws. Luna lay beside him, her eyes sharp even if her body had slowed. Sarah crouched beside Scout and clipped on his harness. "You ready?" He didn't bark, just looked at her and waited. Good. And the trail was a simple one. 500 yards, one curve, 2-cent articles. It was designed to build confidence, not challenge limits. Scout lowered his head and started. Sarah followed silently, her boots pressing soft prints into the mud. Scout paused at the edge of a stream, lifted his nose, then darted left. Sarah's breath caught. He was reading the air, just like Luna had done, and 10 seconds later, he found the hidden victim, a volunteer wearing a hoodie soaked in scent, and sat beside him, tail wagging gently. Sarah smiled. Attaboy. Back at the porch, Maverick stood and hobbled halfway down the steps. His hind legs weren't what they used to be, but he still wanted to see. Scout ran to him and dropped into a playful bow. Maverick just stared at him, then gave a single, quiet bark. Sarah liked to believe it meant, "Well done." The training intensified that month. Scout learned to ride in helicopters without panic, to ignore gunshots and fireworks, to distinguish Sarah's scent from dozens of others. He began to respond to subtle cues, a flick of her hand, a shift, in her weight, even the change in her breathing. Luna, too, had a role. She became the emotional anchor, helping Scout understand that search wasn't just about finding, it was about staying, about guarding, about knowing when someone needed more than just rescue. It was about compassion. In May, the team received a call from a neighboring county. A 72-year-old hiker had gone missing after taking a wrong turn on a poorly marked trail. Cell signal was non-existent. His last known location was 6 hours old. The sun was dropping. Sarah hesitated. Maverick couldn't go. Luna had retired. But Scout was ready. She loaded him into the truck and drove. The mission wasn't long. Scout locked onto the scent within 15 minutes. He worked calmly, cutting across a fern-covered slope, moving with confidence but not arrogance. He paused twice to confirm wind direction, then turned sharply and disappeared through a stand of pines. When Sarah caught up, he was sitting beside the missing man, tired, bruised, but alive. Scout didn't bark. He just waited. Like Luna. That night, back at home, Sarah poured herself a cup of coffee and stood on the porch as the dog slept behind her. Maverick let out a soft, satisfied grunt. Luna's chest rose and fell in deep, even breaths. Scout lay at the edge of the deck, head up, eyes on the woods, watching. Over the next few months, Scout joined 5 more searches. He found 2 lost hikers, a missing boy with Down syndrome, an injured trail runner, and 1 elderly woman with early-stage dementia who had wandered 3 miles off path and curled up beneath a tree. Each time, he worked better, cleaner, more intuitively. Sarah never stopped missing the chaos of the early days, when Maverick and Luna were young, when the work felt endless, when every call was a new story waiting to unfold. But she also never stopped being amazed, because even after all the lives saved, after all the stories told, something in this work never got old. Something in it always felt holy. One evening, she opened a package that had arrived without warning. Inside was a framed photo, a screenshot from the body cam footage during the Wilson rescue. It showed Luna standing at the edge of the ravine, ears forward, body tense, staring down at what no one else could see. There was a note tucked behind the frame. It was from James Wilson. He'd found the photo in an old archive drive and wanted her to have it. At the bottom, he'd written, "Some angels bark." Sarah hung it above her desk. Beneath it, she placed the 2 leather collars, Maverick's and Luna's, on small wooden stands. Between them, she added Scout's first tag. It didn't say found yet, but someday it would. That summer, The Scent of Hope Foundation hosted its first national conference for canine rescue teams. Sarah was asked to give the keynote. She brought Scout with her. Maverick and Luna stayed home, older now, sleeping more, still chasing dreams in their sleep. But their presence was felt. When Sarah stepped on stage, she paused before she spoke. She looked at the sea of uniforms, of leashes and vests, and hopeful eyes, and she said, "If you're lucky, you'll get one dog in your life who changes everything." Then she smiled. "I got two." She told them about the cold nights, the false trails, the miracles, the heartbreaks, the way dogs will search through thorns and rivers and wind tunnels just because they believe you need them to. She told them about Scout, and she told them about Luna, how she didn't bark when she found Ranger Wilson, how she just stayed. After the conference, a young handler approached her with tears in her eyes. "I lost my first dog last month," she said. "I wasn't sure I could keep doing this." Sarah handed her a small patch she kept in her bag. A stitched paw print over, a compass. It read, "Keep searching. They'd want you to." The young woman hugged her, and Sarah knew. The next generation was ready. These stories don't end. They pass forward. From one paw print to the next, from handler to handler, dog to dog, heart to heart. You don't really finish this work. You just pass the leash. And maybe that's the most lasting legacy of Maverick and Luna. Not just the people they saved, or the trails they cleared, or the techniques they pioneered, but the lives they inspired, the hands they steadied, the ones they made believe again. Because in a world full of unknowns, fear, and darkness, there is nothing more comforting than the sound of paws breaking the silence. Coming for you. Thank you for walking with us through this story. From the first bark to the last quiet moment. Whether you're a dog lover, a rescuer, or someone who's ever felt lost, we hope this journey meant something to you. And now we want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a moment when an animal seemed to understand you better than any human could? Drop your story in the comments. We read every one. And don't forget to subscribe to Heroes for Animals for more true, powerful stories where animals become heroes in ways no one expects. Until next time, stay safe, and never stop believing in the ones who never stop searching.